Hey everybody, happy Saturday, Bourbon Talk Happy Hour. It is good to see everybody. I missed you all last week. Taking a week off was nice, but I do have to say that I felt a hole in my heart. I was missing talking about things and engaging in these things and having conversations. It's so nice to be here. I figured a couple of things. One, if I did this at 8 p.m. on Sunday of the Super Bowl, that would be right around the time of the halftime show, more than likely, and I would already be a few beers in, and that would not make for a good program, I don't believe. I don't think that would make for cogent political analysis or insights. Very memeable, I assume. I assume there could be a lot of gifts that could come from that. I assume that could lead to infamy, public humiliation, something along those lines. So, but I didn't want to skip this week. I wanted to get back because I got stuff I want to talk about. I got ideas. I got something that I'm working on, and I wanted to share it with you all. Before we do, a year ago, around this weekend, I don't know, those of you who listen to the Muckrake podcast or pay attention to it, it is a drizzly cold evening here in the blue state of Georgia, by the way. Last year, I was in Iowa. I was in Des Moines, Iowa, and I was reporting from the Iowa caucuses, a miserable Iowan winter, and I got so sick, way up there at the top of the sickest I've ever been. And looking back, I know it was early in the timeline. It was very COVID-ish, is what I would say. I got incredibly sick. I started running a very high fever. And then I got this. This is so lame and nobody wants to hear about this, but I'll tell you anyway, and then we'll talk a little bit. There's this chain of pizza that I love it. It's called Polly Eyes. And I got really addicted to it in Carbondale, Illinois, when I was there at grad school. But they had one in Iowa, and I got it. And it was like, I was like, I'm sick. I don't feel good. All I want in the world is this pizza. And on top of that, for the record, I am a San Francisco 49ers fan. And so the Niners were in the Super Bowl. I mean, they were going to lose, but so I get this pizza, my favorite type of pizza in the world. My team is in the Super Bowl. And I have to tell you, I was so unbelievably sick that I fell asleep multiple times during the Super Bowl. And as I ate my pizza, here's an interesting tidbit. It didn't taste like anything. It was very odd. It didn't taste like anything. It didn't smell like anything. So I don't know if what I had was COVID, but I can tell you that whatever I had was like COVID, if not COVID. So a year ago, this weekend, terrible weekend. I remember, I didn't talk about it very much on the podcast, but like I had to go take like a cold bath because my fever was so bad and like I was delusional. And I was like, oh, this is how people like die of the flu. I was like, that's how bad I felt. And I had never, ever felt that bad before. Just like that. It was awful times. Yeah, Cape Girardeau has a Polly Eyes too. Yeah, I took some students through there on the way to a conference one time. We stopped there. Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to talk to everybody. I've got questions for tonight, but I'm working on a theory right now. And I wanted to use, every now and then, maybe it's not going to be every bourbon talk, but I want to start getting some ideas out there, both in terms of a conversation, what people think of it, how they feel about it. But I need to say it out loud. as I'm doing the research that I'm doing to sort of work it out and to sort of not just turn it into from a working theory into a theory, but turning it into a working theory, like how to start to take this thought and to move it into action. And I think in a way that it is a potential solution to what we're going through right now and a potential explanation for what we're going through right now. It takes a lot of the things I've been talking about on these Bourbon Talks and tries to synthesize it, but also bring it into the realm of action. So those of you who have been watching this for a while or listening to the podcast or whatever, I think some people have heard me talk about what my current project is. And what I'm doing right now is I am, like I did with American Rule, where I learned American history and like went through and went to the actual sources and, looked between the lines of conventional history and started to learn like what had actually happened with America and what America was. I'm doing that with so-called Western civilization. I'm starting a book that begins with the Roman Empire and sort of traces the relationship between Christianity, the fall of the Roman Empire, and then throughout into modern history to sort of explain where we are and what's going on and sort of get an idea of how fascism, authoritarianism, and oppression work. And right now, I'm in the so-called age of discovery, is what you would call it, or the Renaissance. And what is becoming very, very clear as I work on this, and I'm developing a theory. I'm calling it a circle within a circle theory. And what I'm starting to understand is that history shows us that politics and society, that there are these moments where it exists and it feels very solid and it feels like reality is reality, right? Like this is how life is and this is the truth, capital T, and this is how life is always going to be and will always live the way that we live. And there are other moments where that, and I call it a circle, that's sort of the reality as it feels, right? Like reality is as it's perceived as being solid. Like, oh, this is America, and America is, exceptional and all of this. And then there are moments where the lie of that moment, the lie that sort of animates that moment, where it's troubled, where all of a sudden the illusion starts to flicker a little bit. And all of a sudden, the mythology and the narrative that powers that moment, it's sort of, like I said, it starts to flicker a little bit, and people start asking questions. They start wondering about inconsistencies. They start wondering about why certain people are in power, or why economies work the way they do, or why a system of power exists and why it is the way that it is. And what ends up happening is that as the myth of the moment starts to fall apart, people start coming up with a new reality, the possibility of something that could happen beyond that circle. And what always ends up happening is that around that circle of reality at the moment, someone draws a new circle. And it sort of takes parts of the original circle that still work and sort of brings them into the reality that the new reality is. And if you'll indulge me, one of the things that I'm starting to recognize with this, so like I said, I've been studying the Renaissance, and it's been really eye-opening, to be honest. And yeah, QAnon actually is, it'll be interesting in here in a second when I draw the line over to QAnon. So if you look at the Renaissance, and I know that a lot of us have just sort of been taught that the Renaissance is this moment where people started painting better or sculpting better or writing better or whatever. And what I'm actually learning is going back to the fall of Rome into the Middle Ages. So in the Middle Ages, after the fall of Rome, Christian forces have just absolutely eradicated all human knowledge and art and culture. They saw it as an affront to God. So much like a rampaging ISIS, they go through and they destroy statues and buildings and libraries and all of that type of stuff. And eventually in the Middle Ages, you have a humanity that can't read. It's not aware of what's going on. It's totally taken over by superstition, right? The idea that, there's some sort of an omnipotent being that is punishing them at any given time, and they have no idea what's necessarily going on. And eventually what happens is when the Renaissance starts to actually take off, what ends up happening is you have a lot of priests who are the only ones who can read or have access to these old books. They start saying, we need to relearn history. We need to relearn stuff from before it was eradicated and wiped from the face of the earth. And they start reading and they start learning. And all of a sudden they start realizing like a lot of the lies that the church has told them have been used to manipulate them and take their money and take their power. And so all of a sudden what they do is they start drawing a new ring, right? And what ends up happening is power moves from the church at the top of, it's called the Great Chain of Being, if you ever want to take a look at this. And the Great Chain of Being says, here is God, here's the angels, here's the Pope, and then everybody underneath them, right? The Pope is at the top, and then there's God and the angels. Well, what ends up happening, and this is one thing that we have to be aware of, is that whenever there are like revolutions or changes or that new circle gets drawn, most of the time it's presented to us as a revolution. But what it actually is it's a change where the rungs get moved a little bit. And eventually, like so for instance, and if you read American Rule, you're aware of this, like the American Revolution was actually like the wealthy and the powerful of America saying we no longer have to pay taxes or bow to the king. We're now in charge. But we are the aristocracy, and there are people below us. So that's like the new circle. That's sort of the new reality that takes over. Is the old reality of monarchy is sort of erased. What we're dealing with right now, and if you've been coming to this talk for a while, or listening to the podcast, or reading my work, I think you're already aware that the reality that we thought that we had in America, particularly the American exceptionalism reality, that myth, it's starting to flicker. Like, we're not a chosen country. We're not, I mean, yes, there are things about America that are different from other countries, but we're not inherently good. We're like other nations. We do good things, we do bad things. There's a mix. We falter, occasionally we soar. And one of the things that is happening right now is that this current situation that we are in, American hegemony, American empire, American exceptionalism, that mythology is falling apart. And remember, there are moments where the circle is concrete, right? You could never imagine another world. You could never imagine another way for reality to feel. And it just so happens that we were born at a really interesting, weird time. I grew up in the 1980s. I grew up, and by the way, we got to talk about Ronald Reagan today because it's his birthday, and I'm very, very glad that we're having this conversation on Ronald Wilson Reagan's birthday. Cheers. And one of the things that happened is we spent so much of our lives being fed this bullshit about American exceptionalism and you know, again, I always say it's like fireworks, bald eagles, Mount Rushmore, all that stuff. And now, and particularly Trump is one of the reasons why the illusion is flickering, but of course, he's a symptom, not the disease. And now that it's flickering, it's time to draw a new circle, if that makes sense. We're now at a point where reality is malleable and it's giving way to something else. This old idea of neoliberal power and economics, the idea that there is this global machine with first world, second world, third world countries, And we have to exploit those people. And, you know, there has to be a working class, middle class, and an upper class, which, by the way, has been completely eradicated. I don't know if y'all have seen it, but I just saw this article the other day that said since Reagan was president, something like $50 trillion has been redistributed from the bottom up. The system doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. It's cruel. We've even reached the point where people are not just unhappy, but they're disillusioned and radicalized. There are people who are becoming terrorists because they're alienated. We know that we have reached a point where things are starting to go a little haywire. And so one of the well, I'm so glad, actually. Pantherog just said, is there no going back to the old circle? So here's what happens. Here's what I'm noticing in terms of the drawing of the circle, right? So the reality has been American exceptionalism, neoliberal globalism, all of that stuff, right? And we are fed a lie. And that lie, and I know that we've all heard this, we are fed a lie that Western civilization is all about progress. And each year that passes, things get better. Just inherently, they just get better. That is a capitalistic lie. That's not true. And one of the things that fascism shows us is that if someone like a Mussolini or a Hitler gains enough traction and convinces enough people, you can actually rewind progress. You can actually go back. And with fascism, you can go back to feudalism. You can go back to dictatorships, monarchies. You do not have to become more and more democratic and progressive and free, right? So one of the things that's happening right now, and this is the crux, and I want people to think about this, and I want to hear what people think about this, because this is what I'm learning as I'm writing this book, as I'm researching this book. The difference right now is that most people don't realize we're in one of those malleable moments. They think reality as it is just reality, and we could never actually change anything. And they're stuck in this idea of American exceptionalism. Maybe this is just a blip. Maybe they believe a lot of the stuff that QAnon tells them. Maybe they believe what white supremacists tell them. They are listening to the old mythologies, and they're being kept at bay so there isn't a new circle drawn. All right? There are people who know that we are in that moment. There are people who understand that reality is malleable and you can move forward or backwards. You can change reality at these little malleable moments. And now that I'm talking about it, I just realized that I have read Steve Bannon talking about parts of this. And now I got to make a note to myself to go look this up. But Bannon has even talked about this, except for it's neo-fascism is what he's saying. There are different types of future for people who recognize that there's a different future. You have fascists who think that the new circle can rewind time, right? It can actually take time backwards, back to feudalism, monarchies, less freedom, less liberty. There are other people who have a ton of money. I'm talking about wealthy, powerful elites who believe that the future belongs to them, futurism. They believe that it belongs in, I don't know, Elon Musk going to Mars, living amongst the stars, eradicating death so they can live forever. Facebook believes that they can run us via algorithms. Google thinks artificial intelligence is the future. All of those things are a new circle. Now, QAnon is another thing. And I wanted to talk about that for a second because QAnon is a new story. It's an old story, but it's brought into the new time. And we can laugh at it all we want, and we can dismiss it all we want. But like other cults, if enough people start to believe it and enough people begin to enact it, it's not necessarily a cult anymore. It's a religion. These things are really, really weird and esoteric. We can change things. But what we have to understand first and foremost is that we are in a moment of malleability. If we can understand that, we can draw a new circle that is actually more democratic. But first and foremost, what we have to do is we have to understand that reality is malleable and that things can change. And if we can start to work towards that, and if we can convince ourselves, gain energy towards it, gain enough momentum behind it, we can make sure that that next circle that gets drawn is more democratic, more fair, more decent, more human. I think we can actually get beyond this idea of the circle. I think that we can get to a point where human beings are living better, more decent lives. But as long as we're kept in these circles, it's not going to work. So that's where I am. That's what I've been studying with this new book. And it has, it's both hopeful, but also very, very large and very heavy. And I want to start working on this thing. I want to start talking about it. I want to start bringing it out. And I think that what we're looking at, like something called the Renaissance, right? Which is the idea that something is happening all over the place and that we can all be a part of something large, and it gains momentum and it gains heft and it gains reality and weight. I think it needs to be a reconsideration. I think we need to reconsider the mythologies of the past. I think we need to reconsider our histories. We need to reconsider our economic systems, our political systems. But the only way that we can actually do that, and by the way, David just brought up the allegory of the cave, and that is absolutely essential in learning that and in understanding what this is. It is very much the allegory of the cave. But I think we can do it. And I think that we can make the reconsideration happen. I think that we're going to have to educate ourselves, and we're going to have to organize ourselves, and we're going to have to fight like hell. But I truly and honestly believe we can do it. It feels very large. And I have to tell you, relearning the history of Western civilization, it's exhausting. Exhausting. Oh, Reese, I'm glad that you said that, because that is another possible other ring, which is fundamental religion, fundamentalism. Whether or not that's evangelical or Muslim faith or something else, some new cult or whatever, like there is a very real possibility it could be fundamentalism. It is not a small project. But this is what I'm wrestling with right now. And I'm going to be talking about it more on here, trying to figure it out as I work on this book. But we're in a moment. I'm sorry, we were born at a weird time. We just were. And we're going to have to do a lot of work. And if we don't do a lot of work, it is we're going to look up one day and somebody else is going to draw that circle. Been watching some stuff on World War I, and everybody was like, we need a war. It'll fix everything. Don't worry. It'll also take care of all of our labor problems. So we'll just get there, and we'll make sure that all the machinery and all the technology will take care of it. We're going to be all right, but we got to recognize what we're dealing with here. All right, I got some questions here. Thank you for indulging me on that. I would love to hear what people think and how this lands. I'm working this thing out as we go, which is exhausting. It's really, really exhausting, and I feel like I don't know. I feel like I'm running at like 100% capacity, trying to understand this and trying to make it come together and make it work. But I'm feeling some momentum on it. I'm feeling some good stuff about it. I'm trying. And I think we can figure this out. All right, I got some questions. Lila, do you think Marjorie Taylor Greene, has a chance to run 3 years from now? Absolutely. Marjorie Taylor Greene right now is gaining so much momentum. And here is a big, giant problem. That thing that I'm talking about, things getting weight and heft and momentum, the internet helps with that shit. Right now, she is making the case for herself to be the heir apparent to Trump. And we're helping her. We're helping her because social media is a tool. It's a marketing device. And it's a machine that is supposed to take our outrage and turn it into money and advertising. And Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump and Josh Hawley and all of these assholes, they get it. They get it. And they're using the machine against us. By the way, it is raining like crazy. I'm going to move over here. Oh, no, I haven't talked about Absolute Proof yet. I'm going to, because I watched that shit. And if you think that I watched that 3-hour piece of shit documentary and I wasn't going to talk about it, you are wrong. All right, moving a little bit. It's getting rough out here. But with Marjorie Taylor Greene, she uses our own outrage against us. And that's a big part of the problem, because when she says something that is trollish, it's almost impossible not to say something in return. It seems egregious. It seems like we should have to tell her off. And that is the same thing that Trump has done and all of these right-wing trolls have done. And in fact, and I talked about this on Twitter a little bit, but there's not enough room to talk about it. That's what like the New York Times and the Washington Post does when it posts one of those dumbass op-eds, because it makes sure that people who agree with it share it, and that we share it because we're pissed off about it. These people are just hijacking the attention economy, and that's all it is. Oh, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene absolutely believes the QAnon stuff, because she's not interested in getting to the heart of anything. She's just interested in something that goes ahead and gives her a right to be an asshole and to go after people. I totally think she believes it. But she's also doing something really weird, which is she is laundering QAnon right now. That little speech that she gave the other day equating QAnon with fake news and she was allowed to believe things, all that she did was launder it of its problems and make it Republican orthodoxy. She absolutely did that the other day. Henry, can you go a little more in depth about what you were saying the other day about politics and reality TV? Absolutely. It goes along with this conversation. Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't want to be a legislator. Matter of fact, taking her off of her committees, I mean, what does she care? She doesn't want to do the work. She doesn't want to go to those meetings. That's awesome for her. That gives her more time to live stream from her office and, file impeachment papers and, talk about the great replacement or whatever in the hell. Like, she's not in Washington, D.C. to pass legislation because the Republican Party doesn't actually have principles. It doesn't actually have a legislative agenda. The fact that they did not have a platform in 2020 is not an accident. She wants to be a star. That's exactly what she wants. And now that Trump has done this, he has opened the door to people who want to be reality TV stars or they want to be famous. He has opened the door for them to go and chase that by being offensive. Lauren Boebert, I would love to see an actual interview with her that asked her about issues because she has no idea what's going on in the country. All she is interested in is being up there and gaining attention and retweets and likes and getting asked onto TV shows. If she got offered a reality TV show, she'd probably resign. That's what she wants. 100%. David says, I'm not a citizen and my kids aren't old enough to be in school. How do I contribute? One thing that I would say is right now, I would spend most of your time figuring out what's going on. Like I keep saying, we got to get educated first, understand the facts front and back, understand what's going on. And once we start understanding what's going on, we can start finding the places we can make differences. And whether or not that means educating other people or volunteering time here and there, like we can do that. I truly believe that. But with Marjorie Taylor Greene, what I would say is that reality TV is a poison. And it has absolutely poisoned our society. And it is raining like mad right now. I'm going to have to move here in a second. This has never happened in the history of Bourbon Talk. Go figure. You host on a Saturday, and this is what happens. I tell you. Reality TV is a poison. And you want to talk about that circle? It's, that's one of those circles. People watch that shit and believe it's real. And what it's also done is, and this is an interesting thing to think about this. We live in this neoliberal environment where our economic systems are just so alienating and it's so hard to get ahead. It's almost impossible to get ahead. It's almost impossible to make enough money to save, pay off debts, pay for healthcare, pay for anything. And one of the things that has happened is that people are looking for a lottery ticket. They're looking for something that will get them above, that will make them a crab, that makes it to the top of the bucket. And reality TV is one of those things. And one of the ways that it has manifested on the right is the right works on perceived persecution. So everybody is looking for a way that they have been persecuted. It was like, if you remember back during the Black Lives Matter protest movement, remember that woman who said that like she didn't get her order at McDonald's because she was a police officer? Remember that? Or do you remember that the police officers were like showing Starbucks coffee cups that said like pig and stuff? They were just trying to get famous. They were just trying to be celebrities on the right. They wanted to get invited on Fox News because Fox News has given them a financial incentive to go onto Fox News. I haven't thought about it until right now at this very moment, but it's Joe the plumber. Joe the plumber who talked shit to Barack Obama, and suddenly he became a celebrity in the right-wing ecosystem. And he got on Fox News. I want to say he ran for Congress, too. But that's what people are doing right now. They're trying to scam things. They're trying to figure out a way to get ahead by pretending to be victims, by getting people upset. Marjorie Taylor Greene is the shitty roommate on The Real World. She's overacting in order to get the attention of the cameras and to get everybody pissed off on her, and so she gets more camera time. That's legitimately what's happening in the politics of America. And whoever follows up in Trump's footsteps, it is going to be somebody who understands that, but is also willing to take it down the fascistic rabbit hole, which I have to tell you, Marjorie Taylor Greene is very willing to take it down the fascistic rabbit hole. So yeah, there is a reality in the future where Marjorie Taylor Greene runs for higher office. Absolutely. Real Housewives of QAnon. Absolutely. 100%. Reality TV is weird. And the more that I study history, the more that I realize that mass culture reflects the psychological state of a nation or a people. Reality TV is just a reflection of who we are in neoliberal global capitalism. Period. Janelle Forsyth. Does the GOP seem divided or look like it's on the decline to you? How can we address the growing desire for authoritarianism in one of our country's major political parties? No, they're not divided. They're trying to figure out a way to keep QAnon close to the chest without, taking on the awful parts of it. They're trying really, really hard to keep their corporate sponsorships and the wealthy to continue pumping money into it, which they will. The wealthy don't care if they traffic QAnon conspiracy theories. They just want to make sure that people don't know about it. Because if you found out about it, you might not buy their products. Because that's one of the only ways that we can actually show our political ideas anymore, which I think somebody asked a question about that, and we'll get to it. But no, they're not divided at all. They're trying to figure out a way to launder QAnon in without QAnon hurting them. And they're working on it day and night. Don't worry. There are think tanks right now that are burning the midnight oil. I'm sorry, it's only 6:30. It's not as late as it feels. It isn't the usual bourbon talk. They are burning the oil right now, trying to figure out how to make QAnon palpable or palatable without it hurting them or sinking them. It is the mythology of fascists. It's just the New World Order deep state conspiracy theory. That's all. And Brittany, you're exactly right. They went ahead and they merged with the Tea Party. It's what they're going to do with QAnon. So no, they're not divided. They're trying to get past Trumpism while keeping Trump supporters and using the things that Trump taught them without all of the negative effects. It's what the Republican Party is. This is their entire jam. Not drinking enough bourbon. That'll help with the cold. Groggy Bones. Jared, as divided and isolated as we are as a society, is there any hope of putting the genie back in the bottle? Or drawing back or eliminating spectacle and theater of politics? Absolutely. That's what I'm talking about with this reconsideration stuff. We can change it. I'll be honest here, and I would love it if other people were too. I'm as guilty as anybody at times. I have had moments where, like, I've gotten engrossed in the spectacle of politics. It's true. We all have to do our parts, though. We can reject this. And one of the ways that we can learn how to reject this is we got to change the way that we work with social media. We got to change the way that we have our relationship with the news. We have to stop looking for heroes and messiahs and start recognizing that even people we agree with are not perfect. I mean, we can't sit here and talk about the cult of Trump without realizing that we have a tendency to forgive people we agree with for things that they have done and pretend that they are perfect. We have to stop making idols out of people. And that's one of the things that the internet's very good at. Because, I mean, you make meme after meme after meme of politicians you agree with, and pretty soon we're not even talking about the politician anymore. We're not even talking about the politics anymore. What we're talking about is you retweeting the meme to tell people, this is my identity, this is what I believe. And then we're not even talking about politics anymore. We're talking about advertising for your own personal brand. We have to rethink everything that we do. We got to work really, really hard because, I mean, listen, we didn't vote for Donald Trump and we understood that he was a danger, but we have all played a role in American culture, and we got to get better. That reconsideration, we got to work on it. I think there's hope. I think we can move beyond this, and one day we'll look back and we'll be like, my God, that's insanity. I can't believe that that's how we lived. I can't believe that's how things were. I think we can get there. I really, truly do. Okay, here we go. Tom, did you really watch Mike Lindell's documentary? Was it terrible? It was awful. 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 It was so badly made. Mike Lindell's documentary was so rough. It was so badly made, and it's amazing. He undoubtedly sunk a bunch of money on it, and it looked like shit. It sounded like shit. It played like shit. It was so bad, and he is so unwell. Mike Lindell is not a well human being, and that people. Oh, the dramatic music was amazing. It's obvious that he thought that this dramatic music was going to make it better, which, you know, fine, put dramatic music in. But they were putting it in at moments that was just, it didn't call for it. It was so badly made. It was so badly made. And I want to point out, it really bothered me because not only was it badly made, and not only did it make no sense whatsoever, and it brought up no actual points. It reminded me of the scene in Billy Madison where it's like, at no point did you even come near a cogent point. We were all stupider for having been here. May God have mercy on your soul. It was so bad. And to watch it and realize that this man was in the Oval Office telling the President of the United States to declare martial law, and the President of the United States was listening to him. And I posted about this today. If you haven't read the thread that I did, Trump could have carried off a coup if he wouldn't have been so lazy and such a coward. The problem is that Trump expected people to do it for him. That one meeting that had Sidney Powell and Mike Flynn in it, and if you haven't read the Axios report on this, you absolutely should. It went on for hours, and Trump just kept waiting on somebody to say, yeah, let's do a coup. Everybody just do agree about it. We got lucky. Holy shit, did we get lucky. That Donald Trump is a total coward. He is absolutely afraid of consequences of his own actions, and he's also lazy and incompetent. We got so unbelievably lucky. The fact that these people were around is incredible, and it revealed an incredible weakness at the heart of American democracy and politics. Oh, that documentary is so piss poor. Awful. Just awful. Shane says, what are you reading right now? So I'm doing research on this Western civilization book. So I'm reading a bunch of different things. I'm actually going through, I'll give you a little tidbit. So I'm going through like the formation of corporations. I'm going through the formation of like international law. First things first, the first like corporations, international corporations, were created to carry out slavery and to profit off of slavery and colonialism. Big shock, I know. International law was written by the people who were employed by those corporations in order to expedite their profiting and their power. Yeah. Yep. The East India Company. It's bad. So I've been reading that. I just got The Rise of Capitalism and Religion, I think is the name of it. And it talks about the Protestant split in terms of economics, and particularly how the Reformation helped lead to the current state of capitalism. What do I think of 2024? I'm worried. I mean, I'm very worried. I think I was talking about this, I want to say back in December, maybe in November. I think Trump is going to be a kingmaker or a queenmaker, and he's going to decide who takes over his legacy. I don't know if he's going to run again. I could see him handing it over to a Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Cotton, a Howley. It's going to be a race for Trump's favor on the GOP side. In terms of what Joe Biden does, I don't know. If I was a betting man right now, I'd probably put money on Joe Biden serving one term and then seeing who comes after him. And I could definitely see a race in 2024 between Harris and Buttigieg and a couple of other people. That being said, things are so unpredictable at this point that it's almost impossible to understand what's happening or where it's going to go. So it could be just a big, giant surprise. But yeah, I'm worried about it. Masked Bastille. Question, if you get to it tonight. Here we are. So are we severely underestimating the number of Q-believing or Republican college-educated people in the public sphere, such as teaching college, those going to run for office, even if it's just their local school board? And if so, how do we combat these people? So first and foremost, and I thought this was something, Matt Iglesias, I know this is going to shock people. Matt Iglesias talked shit and he didn't know what he was talking about. I know. I'm surprised too. The guy whose biggest plan right now is that an America that doesn't have any money or health care should increase its population up to 1 billion. I know that's shocking. I love it. I love it when these incompetent people, use their privilege and their connections to just have jobs for life. I'm not bitter about that as a guy who went to state schools and has a bunch of student debt. I'm not bitter about that at all. Not at all. But he showed this graph that was like, only 20% of people believe in QAnon stuff. Well, first and foremost, maybe, and that's still a huge number. But on top of that, I don't think people understand that. Yeah, I don't know about this Substack thing. Is that a thing worth doing? I don't even know. Some people have reached out to me asking me if I'm going to do a Substack. I don't know if I'm going to. I got to look into that. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I got to look into it a little bit more. I want to write, but I don't know. We'll see. I got to figure it out. It took me forever to get a podcast. It took me forever to get a Patreon because I was afraid everyone was going to think I was a grifter. Now here I am. So I would actually say that most Republicans, besides, I'm not going to stop doing a bourbon talk. These are too much fun. I like you guys too much. I enjoy this stuff way too much. I think that a lot of Republicans have QAnon adjacent beliefs. And I think that they don't know that it's QAnon. And they don't know it's QAnon because eventually what happened with the QAnon drift is they started to spread QAnon ideas without calling it QAnon. And they would even say in their conversations and their postings and their deliberations, they would even say, stop saying QAnon. You have to stop saying QAnon because it's going to upset people or it's going to drive people away. You just have to tell them QAnon things and then get them in and they'll agree with it. And so, yeah, QAnon light, that's a good way to put it. So I think that, and again, this is like an interactive, aggressive form of New World Order, elders of, or protocols of the elders of Zion, deep state, all of those fascistic, white supremacist, white paranoia conspiracy theories. I actually think there are a lot of them. And I think that, like we watched with the Tea Party, this next generation of Republicans, much like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Boebert and Madison Cawthorn and Gates, I think we're going to see a lot of new Republicans in the next couple of elections who believe in it. And they're going to carry it into Congress and continue until the Republican Party eventually just goes away and leaves us alone. Now, how do we handle it? How do we fight back? The way that we fight back is we have to understand the conspiracy theory. We have to understand how it is that QAnon is radicalizing people, what the narrative is, and how it's worked. And again, this goes back to what we keep talking about on these Bourbon Talks, which is conspiracy theories are simplified explanations of larger problems that redirects anger from the people who cause the problems towards vulnerable populations. If we can learn what they are, we can move outside of the narrative and we can start disarming them. The problem is right now with someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and tell me if you've noticed this. The news is like, oh, can you believe this crazy shit lady over here? The things she's saying, they are crazy. And that's it. That's it. Jewish lasers. They're profiting off of her. They're making her a spectacle. The same way they did with Donald Trump in 2015 and 2016. They don't care to know about this stuff. They don't ask people like myself and people like Marc-Andre Argentino who study this, or the people who do the QAnon Anonymous podcast. They don't ask those people, Will Sommer. They don't ask those people what's actually going on. They just want to make them sideshow acts and profit off of them. And if you remember from the 1980s and 1990s, and I'm sure that you do, it's the exact same thing as what household product is causing cancer. Story tonight at 11 p.m. Tune in. That's what it is. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a scary boogeyman, the same way that Donald Trump was in 2015, 2016. And they just continue pumping attention into her and pumping attention into her. The solution, the antidote to this poison, is we have to get better in how we use social media because they're using it against us. And we have to understand fascism and conspiracy theories and what they are and how they work. If we learn about them and we become experts in them, we can defeat them. It's a big, giant thing. Right, the same way the right uses the squad. Oh no, the squad. Vaguely progressive politicians. Oh no, they're radicals. Ugh. Melissa, I heard you on some podcast, I forget which one. Hey, cheers, I hear you. But I heard you talking about how we've been tricked into believing the things we buy and things we wear have taken over our political imaginations, and it sounds right, but I was hoping you could talk more about that. Absolutely. The corporations and the ad people that they employ are engaged in psychological warfare. When they sell you products, and by the way, just think about this tomorrow when you're watching the Super Bowl ads. They're not just selling you products. They're selling you a psychological manipulation. Most of the time they're saying, hey, you should probably buy this product or you'll end up dead and alone. Or everyone's going to laugh at you, or you won't, be invited to the party if there were parties. And basically what we have been taught is that the only choice that we have is what products we buy. Edward Bernays, absolutely. Edward Bernays is the godfather of this. Edward Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew. And by the way, he helped Woodrow Wilson create the fantasy of American exceptionalism in the World War I era. And then he came back from doing that, turning Woodrow Wilson into a messiah figure. He came back and he sold his services to all these corporations and said, we will use psychological appeals, things that people don't understand, and we'll make them buy our products. And so eventually, we get to a point where we don't realize that our unconscious desires are being used against us, and we're not worried about politics. Instead, what we're worried about is Coke versus Pepsi. What's this say about us? Oh, Pepsi, it's the choice of a new generation. Well, I'm young and hip, so I should probably buy Pepsi. Oh, I'm the kind of person who would go snowboarding, so I'll buy Mountain Dew. All of a sudden, what you're doing is you're expressing the person that you want to present to the world through the things that you buy. I mean, and listen, part of the problem is understanding it and accepting it and seeing it in yourself. I mean, I'm sitting here in my costume, my Midwestern public intellectual costume. I mean, that's what I'm doing. I'm sorry, but we all are. We're projecting our insecurities and who we want to be to the other world based on what we buy and what we present to the world. And when we start understanding that, Bernays didn't just push smoking. He pushed smoking as a symbol of our independence and liberty, but also, oh, I'm not afraid of death. Look at me do this thing that could kill me. So the whole point is that we have gotten caught in this alternate reality where we're buying these products to go ahead and voice who we want to be, as opposed to being involved in the political process and being involved in society. And it's not a coincidence that a lot of this took off as the people's movement of the 1960s and 1970s, civil rights, the women's movement, the anti-Vietnam, anti-war movement. Once those things started taking off, they said, oh, that's cool. You guys like blue jeans? You guys like those clothes? We'll sell them to you. Now, all of a sudden, you can wear those clothes. You don't even have to go to Kent State and get killed. All of a sudden, you can be a political radical, a liberal. You can be a leftist simply by wearing the right things. And now it's so bad. It's such a terrible knot that social media can now understand who you're going to vote for and what you're going to do and what you're going to buy based on your pictures, your posts, the things you like, the groups you're part of, because social media is advertising 3.0, 4.0, where you tell them what to advertise to you. It's why they're so good. The reconsideration that I'm talking about, we have to move to an internet where we have to pay for things. And I hate to tell you that, but we have to start paying for things, because when you get things for free on the internet, you are paying in data. And we have to get beyond that. And we have to start breaking beyond this consumerist expression of ourselves. We have to break beyond it. Because if we don't, we're going to be chasing shadows the rest of our lives. And we're going to die with a bunch of people who don't understand what world they're living in and what they're doing. This is a massive issue. This is a massive issue. And I hope people can hear it and they understand. He says on YouTube, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I'm trying really hard to use the social media platforms to educate. And that's rough. That's rough. I understand what Twitter is. I understand what Facebook is. I understand what YouTube is. I'm trying to use them for good. I'm only a person. I'm only one man. I fall short sometimes. I succeed other times. I'm trying really hard to make it matter in this. It's hard to be in the quote-unquote matrix and make the matrix work for you. But I'm trying. I'm trying really hard. That's a thing for another day. I would love to talk more about that. Is how we can use these machines that are designed to keep us from actually changing things, how we can use them to make life better. I'm trying really hard. I've had to look in the mirror a lot. I had to rethink how I use social media and how I presented myself and what I did and how I behaved. It's really, really hard. But we got to do it. We got to stop mindlessly using this stuff without thinking about it. Okay, we got two questions together. Hazel says, what will we do if they don't convict Trump? And Laura says, Forbes has an article about Trump using campaign donations for personal stuff after the election was called for Biden. I'm skeptical he'll see any punishment or any charges. What are your thoughts? I keep saying this, and this isn't popular. I don't think Trump's going to be convicted in the Senate. I don't think he's going to face charges from an investigation. Maybe he will in New York. I don't know. I know that's not popular. But I have to tell you, from examining history and modern politics, White, powerful, wealthy men do not often face consequences for their actions. That's rough. And I want Trump to be held responsible for the things he's done. I think he's carried out genocide. I really, truly do. I think with the pandemic, he's carried out genocide against political enemies. Bernie Madoff did. That's because he took the money of the wealthy and the powerful. I agree with that. Bernie Madoff is like one of the few who actually did. It's when you screw the wealthy and the powerful, that's when you as a white wealthy person face consequences. I don't think he's going to face consequences necessarily. Maybe he will in New York. I don't know. But here's something that I want you to hear, and this is important. If he does, like when he's not convicted in the Senate, because the Republican Party can't do it without taking a hit to the party. If that doesn't happen, you have to understand that that doesn't mean that things are hopeless. It means that there is a block right now that we have to get beyond. It means that we have to reject the Republican Party to the point where the Republican Party doesn't hold any sort of power or weight or leverage. That has to be a goal. We have to eradicate the Republican Party from elected office. Not via violence, not via intimidation. We have to beat them in elections until they are no longer trusted with political office. But what do we do? What do we do? We say, man, that fucking sucks. And then we fight for the next day. And then we make a world that would hold Donald Trump accountable. We say, that sucks. And it's wrong, and it's a miscarriage of justice. So let's create a world where Donald Trump will be held accountable. Cameron Lynn, today is Reagan's birthday. Hey, happy birthday, Ronald Wilson Reagan. How should we remember him, and what is his true legacy? His true legacy is that Ronald Reagan was the pitch man for the redistribution of the wealth from the bottom up. He had no idea what he was doing as president. He was supplied all of his plans and all of his ideas by right-wing think tanks that wanted to get your money, my family's money, our family's money, everybody's money, and disable government as a public good. Every night, he would read a script for the next day. He did more work than Donald Trump did, but not by much. Ronald Reagan was the proto-Trump. He went out and he put a happy face on the destruction of the social safety net. He destroyed the New Deal and the social safety net. Sucks. And on top of that, because him and his communications group and the propaganda outfit around them was so good and so competent at what they were doing, they wrapped American politics with American exceptionalism. And by the way, here's an announcement for those who are listening for it. I believe the Muckrake audio documentary is going to come out this week. If you want a preview of it before everybody else gets it, patreon.com/Muckrake podcast. Our patrons are going to get it first. It's really good. It's really, really good. Ronald Reagan took America from an actual conversation about what was going on in this country and moved it into the metaphorical realm where nothing actually existed. Everything was symbolic. Ronald Reagan was not a president, so to speak, instead of a pitchman. And what he did is he created a situation where the wealthy and the powerful could plunder us for our money and our power and our wealth and create a government that didn't work for us. And here we are. And he created a situation where it was impossible for his opponents to criticize him. And I talked about this in American Rule. The re-election strategy of Ronald Reagan was to make Reagan synonymous with the American myth so that anybody who criticized him or his policies was criticizing America. And so what happened then? The Democratic Party had to capitulate. The Democratic Party said, we will never win another election if we criticize Reagan or neoliberalism. And this is an important thing. And we're getting ready to get to an hour and we're going to finish up our drink and pour some more. It's important to point out, neoliberalism is not liberalism. Neoliberalism is a faith in markets and giving the wealthy money because we trust them with the money over other people. It was Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, George H.W. Bush, the Heritage Foundation, all of those people. That is neoliberalism. And that is the lasting legacy of Ronald Reagan. 4, 3, 2, 1. To the memory of that shit. Clinton was absolutely a neoliberal. Clinton was part of the Democratic Leadership Council. And Clinton, with Al Frum, got together and decided the Democrats were never going to win another election unless they got rid of their work with people of color and stopped fighting the system and embraced the system and put a human face on Reaganism. Bill Clinton ran against George H.W. Bush from the left, but also on the right, which is something we don't think about. American politics is not as easy as saying left, center, right. It's all messed up. The Democratic Party got pulled right by Ronald Reagan, and that is the real legacy, which is we now live in a society where the social safety net has been completely shredded. We don't have a real understanding of quote-unquote leftist, and that's where we are. Absolutely awful. Absolutely awful. Ronald Reagan was a disastrous president who didn't have actual principles. He wasn't fiscally conservative. He ran up deficits left and right. He didn't actually care about troops. He got rid of all their benefits while, standing in front of a flag. He didn't care about any of this stuff. He was a pitchman. Sucked. Related. Jason Grant, watching the Reagans on Showtime. Good documentary series. I was actually shocked by how good of a series it was. Showtime's The Reagans. It actually got a little bit into this stuff, which I thought it was cool. Pretty good stuff. Watching the Reagans on Showtime and thinking to myself, we already had our more polished Trump, at least from a domestic policy standpoint. Absolutely. Seems to me the core battle for America is against conservatism as a governing philosophy, even more so than against Trumpism. Thoughts? Here's the thing. It's not conservatism. It's not actually conservative policies. They got rid of that. They don't have principles. The Republican Party has no principles. They're not fiscally or socially conservative. They're not pro-life. They're not pro-troop. They're not even pro-nationalist. They're none of that shit. They just keep figuring out things that they can use as political cudgels. That's it. They are maintaining the dominance of white supremacist capitalists. That's it. They're not even conservatives. But I do agree, and let me see, that was Jason. I think Jason has a point, which is that we're still fighting Reaganism. We're still fighting neoliberalism. And this, by the way, to go back to the idea of conspiracy theories. The New World Order conspiracy theory was a simplified explanation of the globalist capitalist system. It said, the reason why you're losing your job in the factory, my family, is because there are people in a smoky room who are against you. And by the way, they're talking about Jews, is what they're saying. And then they're working with traitorous liberals, and they're working with people of color, and they're just all going to screw you over together. That's a simplified explanation that redirects anger from neoliberals to this fascist conspiracy theory. What actually happened was that Ronald Reagan was pushing neoliberal globalism in the 1970s. And do you know why? Somebody ask why, because I'll tell you why. They wanted to push globalism so that corporations could begin moving industry into countries that didn't have minimum wages, they didn't have health insurance, they didn't have, like climate or regulations that said that you could only have this amount of output or whatever. They wanted to go to other countries and exploit labor for pennies on the dollar and then ship it back and sell it to people. Child labor laws. They wanted to exploit people for less money. And they wanted to do it because, hey, everybody, what happens if you exploit labor over here? What happens in America? You're right. all of a sudden you can exploit people in America. And that's where we're going, by the way, people. Ronald Reagan was a pitchman for that in the 1970s. He constructed it in the 80s. George H.W. Bush pushed it in the 90s, and Bill Clinton signed it in his first term. NAFTA was not Bill Clinton's brainchild, but he carried it to term and delivered it. And by the way, who voted for it in Congress? Republicans. Republicans voted for it. Neoliberalism is the lasting legacy of Ronald Reagan, and also Margaret Thatcher. And by the way, we don't understand that because it has the word liberalism in it, and it's hard to work that, but that's what it is. And we're living in the death throes of neoliberalism right now. It doesn't work. Neoliberalism doesn't work. It has worked for decades now to exploit people, but there is no way possible to make it work. I'm trying to mute this person as well, but I don't know if it helps other people. Every now and then, people, we get trolls. I'm sorry. Feeling good about this. I missed Bourbon Talk last week. I needed a week off. We need a week off every now and then to sit with our thoughts, take a breath, do whatever. I missed Bourbon Talk last week a lot. I'm pumped about this. Thank you so much. David Petraeus says, discuss the 2000 bait and switch and the Dems' reflex austerity. I think the neoliberal mindset, I didn't plan on that, epitomized by Summers needs to be excised. That is the problem. This is the problem, is that the Democratic Party is so afraid of being called socialist and radical that they have been like, hey, we'll vote for your war. We'll vote for your package. We'll vote for mass incarceration. We'll vote for your tax cut. Just don't call me a radical. Please, sir. Please, sir. Don't call me a radical. Please don't call me a radical. And in their minds, they're thinking about how Ronald Reagan won basically every state. That's what they're doing. This whole thing, they don't want to be called fiscally liberal. They're terrified of it. Terrified of it. But we have to push it. It's not enough to simply say, well, you got $600 checks. We'll get you $1,400. That's not enough. Go big. Part of what I'm talking about with the reconsideration is the idea that we need big ideas. We can change shit. We can do big things. We can be ambitious. And I have to tell you, I have some problems with Joe Biden. I have for a while. And if you've listened to this or you've listened to the podcast, you know this. I have problems with the fact that Joe Biden was one of the architects of mass incarceration. Joe Biden helped create this whole DLC movement to the right. And also, by the way, I did not like how Joe Biden was like, I don't know, $50,000 in student debt. That seems too much. That wasn't cool. But Biden has been a little bit left of what I expected. And I will call it like it is, and I will tell you when I don't agree with the Biden administration, and I will tell you when I think it's weird, because there are moments when it is weird, and we should not treat people as heroes or messiahs. It's been a little bit left of what I thought it was going to be. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Yeah, I'm not a fan. Joe Biden is not my favorite person in the world, I'll tell you. I'm going to hide this troll. You should do that as well. But I will tell you that I think the administration understands that there is pressure on the left, which is my message to you. Keep it up. Keep it up. Because we talked about this leading up to Biden's election, which is that Biden is very much a weather vane. He moves based on left or right. Keep it up. Decide what you want. Decide what you want the world to look like. Say, do you want this? Do you think that the Democratic Party isn't moving further enough? The Democratic Party needs to understand that it needs to move left. And that's what the moment requires. Amanda says, could I do a bourbon talk on the term neoliberal? That would be an interesting bourbon talk. I feel like some people would show up. I feel like other people wouldn't. I would love to have a discussion about that. One of the things that I keep thinking about, and I did the Capital Pooch thing, or Putsch. I'm from Southern Indiana. It's hard to wrap your head around certain words that you've only read, not said. I think that there are some explainers to do and primers to do. Maybe that's a good suggestion. I'll think about that. I think I'm going to do one on the reconsideration idea, and maybe on the neoliberal idea. I think these are things to do. I keep trying to figure out what is the best use of time and how to get things out there, and I keep finding that like the Bourbon talks do one thing, and the American Rule lectures do another, and then the special Capital Putsch does another. So I'm trying to figure that out. I appreciate thoughts on that. It's a hard time. It's a hard time to figure that out. Okay. We have Vivaldi's Four Seasons Landscaping. Still a good joke. Still a good joke. Why do you think there's still resistance to eliminating the Senate filibuster? Because eliminating the filibuster seems like a radical agenda. And the Democrats are so afraid of being seen as radicals. If they're seen as revolutionaries, they're terribly afraid of things happening to them and not getting reelected. Democrats have a natural inherent fear of that. And that goes back to Ronald Reagan and the myth of American exceptionalism and the myth of Reaganism. Democrats need to forget that fear, and they need to go big. Because right now, there is, and by the way, I'll go ahead and I'll loop in this. Andrew Galvin says, over the next 2 years, what are the best ways Dems can use their majority to diffuse the white status anxiety? There is a massive hole for the left to run through. Trumpism had to just lay so many weird ideas, right? Trump served the wealthy and the powerful while appealing to a populist base. That populist base is open. The Democrats can go get them because it's their old base. Those people voted for Obama because Obama at least talked to them. Those people are the people that the Democrats used to engage with and caucus with and group with. The Democrats can do that. And I actually think that there is room right now for the Democrats, if they can get rid of their fear and their irrational terror of being called radicals, they can go that way. But there is a fear there. They're so terrified of being called radical and liberal and socialist. If they can get rid of that fear and they can start appealing to that old caucus, that old group that they used to work with, they can change the world. But they have to recognize that there's a lot more power to be had by embracing Frederick Delano Roosevelt versus anybody else. Pass some shit that helps people. Get them money. Get them money. Put industry in middle America. I keep saying, if you want middle America to believe in climate change, give them jobs fighting climate change. Do it. Do it. Ah, Bradley, fears the mind killer. Here's to Dune. I'm ready to see the new Dune. I am a Dune David Lynch apologist. I love it. I might watch it tonight. It's a great movie. It's weird. It's not perfect. It's messy. I wish more movies were like that. I wish the new Dune was already out. Aaron Osowski, is the Patriot Party just a far-right wet dream, or do you think Trump and his fascist allies have true intentions? No, I actually don't think that Trump wants to start a new party. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. Like, Trump doesn't want to be a part of a party. Trump doesn't want to have to negotiate local elections, congressional elections, state elections. He doesn't want anything like that. What he's trying to do is he's trying to assert his control over the Republican Party. That's all. And this goes back to the Tea Party, which again was created by the Koch brothers. They are trying to create a political movement that the Republican Party has to absorb and legitimize in order to make it all work and make their base continue for them. And you're not wrong, Tracy, that it's about the money trap. It's about the money that can possibly be made by people who want to pay money for this. Because the Republican Party doesn't serve their base. The Republican Party serves one base, and that is corporate oligarchical power. That's it. All of the white supremacy, all of the other appeals, all of the other mythologies, it's in service of that. That's it. And every now and then a populist uprising comes up, and the Republicans are like, ooh, I guess we helped create that with Fox News. I guess we gotta embrace it. And that's what's happening right now with both QAnon and also Trumpism. So, no, I don't think the Patriot Party is going to be its own thing. It'll move the Republican Party further left, even though they're already absolutely subsumed by fascistic abyss. All right, we got the last question, but I have to tell you, before we get to it, I'm so glad we're doing this. I missed this last week. It's weird that we're doing it on a Saturday. It's 7 p.m., which is earlier than the usual start time, but this is nice. It's a drizzly evening. I enjoyed it. We'll be back next Sunday on Valentine's Day. I hope you'll join me. I hope that'll be nice. Maybe even by then, our audio documentary will be out, and we can talk about that too. That would be cool. And again, I want to hear from you what you think about the circle within the circle theory, the reconsideration theory, how we might be able to give inertia and heft to a revolutionary movement. I want to hear from you. For everybody who's interested, my email is jysexton@gmail.com. Send me a message. Let me know how you feel about it. I want to hear about this. I want to develop this thing. I think it's the way out. I actually think it's the way out of this thing. All right, last question. They never gave me a name. Maybe discuss Joe Manchin. Here's what I'll say about Joe Manchin. Kelly, what's yours? Said I didn't respond to yours. What's yours? And I'll respond to it. Real quick about Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin's a Republican. Joe Manchin is a Republican who enjoys unbelievable power and leverage because the Democratic Party has to hold on to the center right. Okay, your email. I'll check that out. I'll check that out. Respond to it. Let me know, and then I'll respond to it. My apologies. No, Joe Manchin's a Republican. In a sane world, the Republicans we would be debating with would be Joe Manchin and Pete Buttigieg. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. In a sane world that made sense, a left, center, right political system, we would be dealing with Joe Manchin as a Republican. And that would work. We could make deals with a Joe Manchin as a Republican if he was the person who actually was part of it. That's the whole point. Is that Joe Manchin is actually a Republican who holds incredible sway over the Republican Party or over the Democratic Party. Here is what we need to think about Joe Manchin, which is this. We should be working towards a system where Joe Manchin wakes up one day and says, hey, everybody, I enjoyed my time with the Democratic Party, enjoyed the cocktail parties, hanging out, everybody. I'm a Republican. Take care. If we get to that point, and that Joe Manchin is suddenly that conduit between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, we have succeeded. And that's where we need to get. We need to stop worrying about appealing to Joe Manchin and working beyond Joe Manchin. I actually think that Joe Manchin, who thinks that he's basically the king of the Senate at this point and the king of American politics, he's actually overplayed his hand. Joe Manchin is actually the canary in the coal mine, which is, if Joe Manchin agrees with this, we've reached consensus between the left and the right. We need to move beyond him. And anything that actually gets to Joe Manchin right now and makes him think that he agrees with it, that's not far enough. We can pass it. And we can pass it in order to try and create a larger majority. And we can use it, again, as sort of a Mobius strip to figure out where we are. But we have to stop thinking about Joe Manchin as an actual Democrat. We have to move beyond that. All right. I'm going to finish this. Cheers. You hung out with me on a Saturday night at 6 p.m. We did this thing, and we did it right. Super Bowl weekend. Ronald Reagan's birthday. Where he needs to be. Cheers to you. I missed you last week. We're going to do this again next week. We're going to do Panther Hawk 40. I'm so glad that you pointed this out. You said you didn't think there were going to be many people there. We had a few hundred people here. My Super Bowl pick is Kansas City. I think Kansas City is going to win this thing. I don't think it's going to be particularly close. I could be wrong. Before we go, I appreciate all of you. You're the best. You're the absolute best. Absolute best. I appreciate you listening to my reconsideration theories. I want to hear what you have to say. Again, jysexton@gmail.com. I want to hear what you think about this idea, but I think that reality is malleable. And when we realize it's malleable and we can create inertia and momentum and heft and reality to theories, I think we can change the world. I really, truly do. Sarah, I actually agree with you. Football is terrible. I played football in high school, and it's not great. It's not great. I still deal. I have a hairline fracture in the clavicle. Terrible. I appreciate all of you. Muckrake Podcast will be back this week. If you want to help out, patreon.com/Muckrake Podcast, all kinds of stuff. Appreciate all of you. You're the best. I think we have hope. I think we have a chance to make things good. Be safe, everybody. Bye.